Hello and welcome. My name is Thomas, and I'd like to welcome you to the second in a three-part video series on how to use Final Cut Pro for creators. Okay, so if you haven't already, I'm going to highly recommend that you pop back over to video 1, again, if you haven't already watched that video, because what we did in that video is we walked through some of the basics of the UI and some of the elements that make up Final Cut Pro. That's going to be really important as we go through this video because we're going to be putting all of those elements to work in this video. One of the things that I've also done is I've put together a little playlist for you, which contains all three of these videos in order. So if you'd like to take a look at that, or if you'd like to bookmark it to go through all three videos at once, you can just check out the link in the description. Okay, so as I mentioned in the previous video, we kind of took the bird's eye view and just kind of looked at what Final Cut Pro looks like, how it's set up, different elements that are there for editing video. Now in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the process of actually creating a sample project. So we're going to go through, we're going to add footage, we're going to add audio, we're even going to add music. We're going to stitch them all together. We're going to mess with the audio levels a little bit just to go through and get you familiar with what it looks like to start working with Final Cut Pro to create a basic project. Now there is one detail that I want to reiterate that I mentioned in the previous video, and that is that this is not a comprehensive how to master Final Cut Pro, because if I were to create a video series like that, it would probably be like 10 or 15 videos long. Instead, and the reason I say that this video series is for creators is because that's exactly what it is. It's just meant to help you get off the ground on basic, simple projects like editing your own YouTube videos, your own TikTok clips, or your own video montages for Instagram. So again, it's not meant to help you become a professional Final Cut Pro user, even though Pro is in the name. It's meant to help you get the basics of using this professional software so that you can do some basic editing to help get your projects off the ground. Okay, so without any further delay, let's jump right in. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about in the previous video is how to structure your project. So I'm not going to go through that again, but what you will see is that similar to the previous one, I've got all these folders set up with all the elements that we're going to be using to build out this particular project. Now, if you look at my project, you'll see that I've decided to order this in 3 different events. The first one is going to contain my project and then just kind of miscellaneous clips. I've got a spot for B-roll footage and then my main footage. So let's go ahead and pop back into footage. And I'm going to take my camera 1 and camera 2 because I typically shoot with 2 cameras. Again, if you don't shoot with 2 cameras, which many people do not, don't worry. You can just kind of use half of what I'm about to show you. But I'm just going to drag this over into the main footage event. And I'm going to take camera 2, and I'm going to drag that over to the main footage event. Then I'm going to go ahead and open up my B-roll, and you'll see that I've got this nice and organized with a whole bunch of B-roll footage that I have shot. If you're not familiar with the term B-roll, essentially it's kind of secondary footage that is used to kind of encapsulate or showcase what it is that you're talking about in your main footage, which typically shows you or maybe a screen capture or something of that variety. Then we've also got up here, I don't actually have in this sample project, I don't actually have any screen caps, but again, just in my folder structure, as we talked about in the previous video, I've just got a spot where we have that available to us if we're going to be doing some screen capture. But in the assets section, you'll notice that I have a bunch of photos, right? So there's some photos I took throughout the process of making this video. And so I'm not going to be using the raw files, which is what these are, but I am going to want to use the JPEGs. So we'll take those, and I'm just going to put those in the main event, which also contains the project, which again, we touched on in the previous video. Okay, and we're going to toss all in these images. So again, these are not video files. These are static images. So photos I've taken with my camera. And you'll get here shortly why we're actually going to want those in this particular project, but you'll also be able to notice some ways that you may be able to incorporate some videos into your projects as well. Okay, then lastly, we have some audio files. So I've got some background music here that I got from Epidemic Sound, which does royalty-free music. So we're going to take that, And then we've also got a mix down version of this. So there's a video I did a little while back on how to actually create a mix down using Adobe Audition. But again, we can save that for another time in another video. And then we have the actual audio for this video that we have recorded, right? So I'm actually just going to put that in the main footage. So one of the things that I do with my videos, and perhaps you may do as well in the future, is that I actually shoot, as you know, 2 different camera angles, but my audio is actually recorded separately with this camera or with this microphone that you see me recording with right now. So you might be wondering, why would you want to record with a separate microphone? In my case, I just really like the quality that comes out of this particular microphone. In most cases, you're probably just going to be using the audio that you're either going to get from your phone or from your camera. I do recommend that you do buy some sort of third-party microphone to go with your recording. And you can go to thomasmcgee.tv/resources, where I actually have a specific microphone that I recommend that can actually attach and mount to your DSLR camera. But again, I do recommend even if you're just using your phone or a basic DSLR camera, upping the audio game is going to make a big it's going to be a big game changer for your videos. But without getting too out in the weeds with that, all you need to know for this video is that we've got video 1, we've got video 2, and then we've got the audio that goes along with those 2 video sources. Okay, so now we've got all our assets in here. So we've got the main project, which also happens to, or our main event, which contains our project. It also contains some photos. We also have our B-roll footage, which is just a collection of short clips that we're going to be using to put together a very short montage. And then we have the main footage, which is going to contain our A camera or camera 1, which is this one, and then our B camera or camera 2, and then the audio to go between them. Now, for most cases, if you're just going to be shooting with a single camera and your audio is built into that video clip, this is pretty easy for you. All you're going to do is you're just going to drag this right down onto the timeline. You're going to be able to see all of your footage. You're going to see these audio levels, which are going to be key to the editing process. But that's it. That's your whole clip right there. And of course, we're going to be doing some editing. But that's all you have to do to get this up and running for just a single camera with the audio built in. However, if you are using one camera and you're using audio to go with it, which is recorded separately, you're going to want to select both of those items. You're going to want to right click, and you're going to want to click on synchronize clips. What this is going to do is it's going to use the audio for synchronization. So it's going to take the audio of the first clip and it's going to override that audio with this separate audio that you recorded. So let's go ahead and just do that just for the sake of this example. Just want to give that a moment to sync, and you'll see it's created this brand new synchronized clip. One of the things you'll also notice about this is that there's different patterns here. There's different waveforms, and they're particularly lower. I actually record my audio out of this fancier mic pretty low because I like to be able to actually pull it up, and there's actually some specific audio filters that I apply to this to make it a little bit clearer, but I record it pretty low. One of the reasons is it kind of filters out some of the pops that you get, background noise, stuff like that. But you'll see that it's now using that different audio and it's overwritten my video. Now in my case, however, I'm not actually going to be using that because I've got separate camera angles. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 3 clips, right click, and I'm going to say new multicam clip, at which point I'm just going to name this the same nomenclature I named for my project, keep it in main footage, and then use audio for synchronization. Click OK. Give that a second. Then what I'm going to do is up at this top right hand corner, I've got an option where I can select angles. Let's go ahead and make this full screen. Now let's go ahead and drag that new multicam clip onto our timeline. And one of the things you'll notice here is that I've got 3 panels. You'll see that I've got my first camera right here, second camera right here, and then my audio file. Then you'll notice that I've got 3 buttons up here. One is I can cut audio and video of the current camera I'm looking at. I can cut just the video, and then I can also cut just the audio. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of this, make sure I'm cutting just the audio, click audio, And now this multicam clip is using that specific audio file. Now, if I want to switch camera angles, I want to make sure that I select this particular option here. So we're only switching between the video, we're not touching the audio. And now, as you'll be able to see, I can cut between my camera angles. So just that simple. Now, as I mentioned, most people are not going to be working with multiple cameras. This is going to be there in case you need it. Okay, so now that we've added our main footage, the next thing that we want to be able to do is start cutting this so that we can add in some separate footage as well. We're going to add in our montage footage next. So all you have to do if you want to start cutting footage is you're going to want to find, and this is going to be used a lot by you, this blade tool right here, or you can just click B on the keyboard. The other thing that you'll notice is that you're able to scrub through specific timestamps on your footage. So you can click up here and you can actually see how far along in your video you are, 7 minutes and 30 seconds, and so on and so forth. Now for the blade tool, all you have to do is hover over a portion of your clip and just click where you want to make a cut for your particular clips. One of the things that you can also do, which will be very helpful for you, is click on the zoom tool, or you can also just click Z on your keyboard. Then when you click on a specific area, you're going to zoom further in or out. So what you can also do is you can hold down, I believe it is the Alt or maybe Control key. I don't know, I've got a funny keyboard that I'm working with. But if you hold down the Alt or Control key, you can actually hold that down, click, and then zoom back out as well. This is going to be really helpful, particularly as you start to learn these keyboard shortcuts. They're going to make your life a lot easier as you're starting to zoom in and zoom out on different areas within your video. What you can also do is you can actually click and drag if you'd like to specify a specific area that you would like to highlight as you are working. One of the other things that you can do as well, if you would like to watch your playback, is you can simply press spacebar to actually start playing the video. So as you're going through and you'd like to see it rendering, you can do that as well. So that's a basic way that we can actually start cutting. Now, one of the things that I typically do as I'm going through and I'm cutting my footage, I'm not going to do too much here because I want to go through and apply some effects to fix the audio. So I'm not going to do too much cutting of this particular clip quite yet. But what you can actually do is you can go through and use these waveforms as your guide in terms of when you're talking and when you're not. As you see here, there's a section where I'm talking and then I just kind of stop and I look off into the distance, probably looking at my notes. So all I could do in this instance is I could click here and then I could press delete to cut that out. And that's how we get a nice cut between those two items. I've also noticed that there's a big section here that I don't really need. I think this is just me reading my notes and prepping. So I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this as well. Okay, so we've got our main footage here, but as I mentioned, we want to add in some B-roll footage. Now, usually what you're gonna do with B-roll footage is you're gonna play it over the top of while you are talking. You can also just place it beforehand, so maybe you wanna do a montage with music in the background. Either one will work, but we're just going to be doing some testing here. So what we're gonna do is we're going to pop in a few clips on top of while I am talking. So these are separately shot B-roll footage that's going to go on top of me talking. All right, so we'll go ahead and pop those in here. As you can see, these are just different angles that I've taken of my microphone, of my desk, of different areas within my office. There we go. So we've got a nice one of this water fountain. We'll just go ahead and use those three for this now, at this time. Okay, the other thing that we're gonna notice about these particular clips is that they've got audio built into them. Now, since these are going to be B-roll clips, and we're going to hear me talking, the last thing that we want to do with that B-roll footage is, the last thing we want is to hear noise that microphone is picking up. So we're gonna go ahead and cut that out by just taking this and pulling it down, this particular line. That's gonna be the audio level. You could pull it up if you wanted to boost it. We're just gonna pull that down on all three of these because we don't wanna hear any of this. Okay, now since these are moving camera shots and I've got some basic stabilization built in, what I'm also gonna do here is I'm going to add in some stabilization. Now over here in the right hand corner, we touched on that this is gonna be the options for the particular clip that we have highlighted. That's going to be over here. And there's going to be a lot of options here, but we're just going to ignore most of these. And at first, what we're going to do, I'm going to check this box that says stabilization. What you're going to see here is it's going to analyze for dominant motion, and it's automatically going to stabilize that footage for me. Now, sometimes if you're working with really shaky camera footage, you might have to add a lot more, or you might have to go in here and tweak with the settings. But for most already smooth footage that maybe has a little bit of shake here and there, that's going to do a great job at stabilizing it for you. So we'll just go ahead and add that for all 3 of these particular pieces of footage and go from there. Now, just a quick note, the stabilization is going to work best with camera shots that have movement. So if it's just you talking on a tripod, there's no reason to add that at all. You want to make sure that this is specifically for shots where there's a specific motion from left to right, or you're panning in. Those type of camera shots are going to be best for this Final Cut Pro tool of stabilization. So now, as we can see, very smooth as compared to what they look like beforehand. Okay, now one of the other things that I touched on in my previous videos is that I shoot at 24 frames per second. However, there are other times when I shoot at different frame rates as well, and this is one of those cases. If you're going to want to use slow motion, or maybe you're using a GoPro or a DSLR that shoots at 60 frames or 120 frames per second, that enables you to slow this down to make it even smoother. So let's take a look at how that would work in Final Cut Pro. And again, you have to make sure that the footage that you're working with was shot in 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. Otherwise, what we're about to do is going to look very bad and choppy. This footage was all shot in 24 frames per second because there's never a time for me to slow that down. These were shot in 60 frames per second because I knew I was going to slow them down to make these shots look a little bit smoother. So all I do is I select this, click on this option right here for speed. I'm going to hit custom, drop that down to 40, and now let's look. Now we see it is super slow. You'll see some flickering with that keyboard. That's just something that's going to happen with some types of lighting if you slow down frame rate, but that's going to be pretty rare. It just happens to be in my case that I'm working with these particular lights while I'm shooting in slow motion. So let's select those options there, custom, drop that down to 40. And you're going to kind of have to do the math here in terms of what you would be slowing these down to based upon, essentially you're converting 60 frames per second to 24 frames per second. So you got to do the math if you're working with a clip that has 120 or even 240 frames per second. Okay, there you can see. A lot smoother with that slow motion. But again, you gotta make sure that your camera is shooting at 60 frames per second if slow motion is something that you're gonna pull into it. Okay, now when you're working with footage that happens to be a straight on or a shot of you, so if you're doing a vlog or if you've got a tripod set up similar to the way that I do, another approach that is helpful is to add in, if you don't have separate camera angles, right? So one of the reasons I add in separate camera angles is because it enables a little bit more interesting shots, right? So it gets a little bit boring sometimes when it's just you facing the camera. And by the way, you might be wondering if we, didn't touch on that previously, the way I'm cutting between these camera angles, just as a reminder, is I've got these views up here, and so I just drag this along the timeline, pick where I want those camera angles to change, and then click on that particular camera angle, and then it changes back. But not everybody can or wants to shoot with multiple cameras. And so a little trick that you can do just to make things a little bit more interesting is to crop in on a portion of your shot just to make it kind of feel like you're changing angles. This also works really well if you want to emphasize something that you're about to say, and we call this a punch-in. So what you're going to do is you're going to put that playhead where you want to start your punch-in. Then what you're going to do is I'm just going to close the angles just so we have a little bit more view here. Yes, wonderful facial expression there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click this button that drops down to crop. Then we're going to go over here and we're going to select crop. You've got these little handles, and we're just going to drag these in a little bit, center that right on my face. And and then we're going to click done. You notice that we've now cropped this particular section, and actually what I should have done prior to making that crop, and you just press Control Z on your keyboard to undo, or you can go up to Edit Undo, which I believe I've already undid that, so that's not a problem. There we go, that brings us back. Before, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use that, press B to get that blade. You're going to actually want to cut the sections that you want to specifically punch in. So, got to do that first, otherwise you'll just be editing the entire clip. So we've gone through and we've cut that section. We're going to select that clip now, then we go down to crop, and now we follow that process. We drag this to resize it. So you just gonna want to do a decent amount of resizing. And do keep in mind, if you're working in 1080p and you're cropping down like this, it could get a little bit blurry. So if this is a technique that you're going to want to shoot, I'm going to recommend that you use 4K with your video footage so that when you're cropping in, it doesn't get extra blurry. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click done. And now let's watch that back. A little bit more interesting than just watching one person talk to the camera for 10 minutes. So that's a little trick that you can implement as well. If you're going to be talking face to camera, you don't really want to or don't have the means or resources to do 2 cameras at the moment, doing a nice little punch in can be a super helpful technique. Okay, so now what we want to do is let's go ahead and take a look at how to also use some of these cropping and transformation tools to work with images. So I mentioned B-roll footage, right? So it's helpful to be able to go through and shoot this B-roll. So, but maybe you just don't have a camera that does this 60 frames per second, or maybe you're not at a location where you can get a lot of B-roll, or you just don't have the time for it. Maybe you don't have the time to shoot that extra B-roll to add in your footage. Well, another option that comes in pretty helpful is the ability to work with photos. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be photos that, like the ones I've taken here. Perhaps you also have screenshots. Maybe you're doing a newscast and you want to be able to scroll down and show the actual website that you're showcasing, or maybe you do have a bunch of photos. Maybe you've scanned in some old photos for a documentary you're making or something like that. The sky's the limit. But photos can actually be a great alternative or even go alongside your B-roll footage. So let's take a look at how that works. So what I did, as you saw, is I took this photo and I just drug it down onto my timeline. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is that there's this little triangle that appeared next to it. In fact, there's triangles that are appearing next to all the footage that we've added as well. That's Final Cut Pro's way of letting you know that it's currently being used in your project. It's on the timeline somewhere. So that's a great way to know. That way you don't add duplicate clips or images to your particular project. One of the other things that you may have noticed, is that I've actually been stacking these things on top of each other as well. So we've got my main footage here, which is kind of the main item, kind of the floor 1 in our hotel of footage, so to speak. And then on floor 2, we've got that footage right here. So you can keep stacking as high as you want. In most cases, you're probably not going to go beyond 2 or 3 floors, but if you get really crazy with titles and transitions, which we'll be touching on briefly later on in this video, you can. But back to the subject at hand, which is a photo. So I've added this photo, and what you'll see there is that you can still see my footage on the right hand side talking kind of in the background. That's because most photos are not the same orientation or size as is footage. Footage is 16:9, and this is going to be something else. So what we can do to fix that is we can select this photo, and then, well, first of all, one of the things we want to notice is the length of the photo on the timeline. And that's going to be the duration of which it shows up on the actual video. So in this case, it's going to be around 10 seconds. This does not indicate its size. We can do that if we want to by this drop down in this tool over here. So with the transform tool, we could click and then drag this to make it significantly smaller if we wanted to. We're not going to be resizing this in this case. If you're working with a photo that you want to kind of show with a background image or something, you can do that. But in this case, we want to do something different. We want to use this as quote unquote B-roll. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click back on that drop down again, and we're going to go down to crop. Now what you could do is just select crop and leave it at that. You can click done. And what it's going to do is it's going to crop to make your photo fill the entire viewport, right? So everything that is the screen size, so to speak. But if we want to make this a little bit more interesting, what we can do is we can select that again, go back to the crop tool, and then select Ken Burns. Now what this is going to do is it's going to have a green frame and it's going to have a red frame. And from the beginning of this clip is where it's going to go, it's where it's going to start. And once it gets to the end of this frame, or the end of this clip, it's going to stop. So it's going to animate a nice little crop for us. So you kind of have that moving smooth B-roll built into it. And so you can go, this is zooming in, but maybe we want to be zoomed in. We want to pan from left to right. Click done. And there you go. Just like you see in so many documentaries, you can do that in just a couple of clicks. Now, one of the other things that you can do as well is you can choose, and by default, this is going to ease in and out, but I prefer the linear. So all you have to do is just right click in this screen and click linear. Here's what it looks like for in, ease, and out. So see, it starts at basically no movement, and then it does the same thing at the end. It kind of slows to a stop. I personally prefer the linear look. Right click, linear, click done, where it just kind of starts out moving. I like that personally, but you can try whichever one you want, which kind of style works best for you. Now, sometimes you want something a little bit fancier in terms of transitioning between clips. As you can see right now, these are all just hard cuts, right? The clip just ends, and then it just has a new clip begin. And that's going to probably work well for most cases, but sometimes you may just want something a little bit extra. So let's go ahead and let's click this button at the top right, this particular button here, where we've got a ton of titles as well as generators. So under custom, we've got a number of special items afforded to us in terms of different pans. These are going to be built in transitions that will help us transition from one to another. So let's say when we're ending this clip, we want it to kind of slide to the right and into this clip. Let's just do it. That's going to make a lot more sense to see it rather than having me explain it. So all we have to do is take this pan right option, and we want to drag it so that it ends. It starts here and it has the same ending as this clip. And as you can see, it's just a layer on top of this clip. Then we want to take the pan 2, drop that so that it starts at the beginning of this clip. And then let's zoom out, let's play and watch what happens then. So as you can see, it just kind of zoomed from one clip to the other, and you can do that by panning up. You can have it go up, you can have it zoom in, you can have it spin. So if you want it to, zoom 1, you just got to make sure that the first one is zoom 1 and then the second one is zoom 2. There you go. It zooms right into the last one. So I thought personally the pan right one seemed to work better, but those are some nice, simple, built-in transitions that you can use to zoom or move from one to another. Now, personally, when I work with this, to my eye, this looks a little bit kind of choppy. So what I've actually done is I've actually downloaded a very affordable, I think it's only $4 plugin for Final Cut Pro, which enables you to add a motion blur to that. So it's just the same process. You just drag this, and these are different amounts. So a little bit of blur, blur 1, a lot of blur, blur 6. So I usually just use blur 4. And then what we do is we just drag that over the top of those two pan actions. Give that a moment to render. By the way, if you see these little gray dots over the top of any of your footage or any of the areas of your project, That's just Final Cut Pro's way of letting you know that it's rendering all of those effects. So once those go away, it means that it's rendered and you should see playback normally. Okay, click play. As you can see, that was just a little bit smoother. And one of the other tricks that you have to your disposal as well, if you ever want to temporarily disable a clip, just click on it. So in this case, I want to temporarily disable this. Click the V key on your keyboard and it'll go away. So here's what it looked like before. Kind of choppy, not too pretty. Re-enable that by pressing V. Just a lot smoother. So there's a ton of extensions and plugins for Final Cut Pro, and I'm going to go ahead and leave a link in the description to the ones that we cover in this video. Okay, so that's the simplest, and I think one of my favorite types of transitions in Final Cut Pro, but there's another type of transition that you can use as well, which I don't use quite as often, but are also at your disposal. If we go to the far right-hand side, you'll notice that we have a number of transitions. And there's a ton in here. I'm not going to go through all of these, but a very common one, I should say, is the cross dissolve. And so these are applied by dragging them and using them kind of like glue to connect two clips. So I'll go ahead and create that transition. And as you'll be able to see, it's going to dissolve, kind of fade between those two items. And then you can also put fade to color at the very end of a clip if you want to. This is going to be between two clips if you want to fade to black. So that's also something that you could do if you're going to be ending your video. That's a way that you can do those as well. So there's a ton in here, but you can follow whichever style kind of works best for you. I personally tend to like these little pan and zooms. I think they look a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner. Plus they're just easier to work with on the timeline. But again, those tools are up to you. Okay, so just a quick recap. What we wanted to touch on here is some of those transitions, but also how we're going to go through and we can create these nice B-roll sequences with photos if we want to, and all of the transforming tools that are available to you. So again, you can resize, you can crop, you can even distort. So if you ever wanted to go in here and actually kind of distort one side like this, you can. Again, we're not going to be using that too often for really basic videos, so we'll just leave it at that. But again, if you ever want to, you can go through and kind of experiment with some of these tools and see if they work for you. But again, that's just the basics for some of those clip editing tools. Okay, so one of the other things you might notice about all my clips is that they probably look pretty desaturated to you, kind of muted, right? You see how there's not very much color in here. And the reason is because I happen to work in a pseudo RAW format. Now, there's some really fancy and expensive cameras out there that let you shoot in a RAW format that you can then go in and color grade later. And that's what I do. So I don't actually work in a RAW format within the camera itself. There's kind of some settings that I've downloaded onto my camera, long story short. But if you happen to be working with a fancier camera that lets you shoot in RAW, it's going to look kind of muted like this. And the reason is because you're going to want to go into Final Cut Pro and actually change those color settings to become more vibrant and to look the way that you want them to. Now, traditionally, the way that you go through and you edit color of a video is to select the clip, then go click this color correction button and start making all of your changes. One of the things that's really annoying about that, however, is that you have to copy that and apply it to all of the clips that you have the same type of setup for, so same color scheme, which gets really annoying, particularly if you notice halfway through that you want to change the color, because then you got to go through and change all those clips. Fortunately, there is a free plugin out there, and I will leave a link in the description, that enables you to do something that makes, in my opinion, Adobe Premiere better than Final Cut Pro, which is the ability to create an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer is simply a layer that you put on top of your footage that applies any number of adjustments. So, in this case, it's going to be our color. So let's go ahead and make those changes. So I'm just going to select that adjustment layer, and we're going to go up here, and first we're going to mess with exposure. Exposure is, it's going to change the darks, the midtones, and the lights. So I usually pull my darkness down just a little bit, and midtones up a little bit. And again, You do not have to follow this exactly. And you don't have to follow this at all if you don't want to. This is only if you want to make slight adjustments to your footage, or if you're working with raw footage, as I am in this case. Then what I typically do is I'm going to pull that saturation all the way up because it's going to pull all those colors out. And then what we're going to be doing is affecting the dark, mids, and lights of the saturation. Saturation means color. So how much color is going to be, how vibrant the color is going to be. So we're going to pull those up a little bit. Actually pull the midtones out a bit more. There we go. And then color is, you're going to change those if you want to change the overall color of your clip as a whole. So if you want to make all the dark colors more closer to blue, you could do that, right? But we're not going to be messing with that in this particular case. So we've got that saturation pulled up. One of the other things you can do is you can select this main option. If you want to give the whole thing a little bit of a warmer hue, you can do that. Or maybe a little bit of a cooler hue, you can do that. But again, for most cases, you're probably going to want to leave this the same, and that'll make more sense here as we progress. But we pulled that saturation up a little bit. Again, you don't want to pull those up too much if you're not working with raw footage like I am, because what that's going to do is make this look really weird and blown out. Only make minor adjustments here. Again, unless you're working with raw footage like I am, make very minor changes. Same thing goes for exposure, very gradual, small changes. Okay, so as we look through this, you'll see it's much more vibrant, much more colorful. So here's before and after, right? And that's only applied to this adjustment layer. So as you can see, before, after, looks much different. Now, alternatively to going in and manually changing the color yourself is you can add in, I'm just gonna add in a separate adjustment layer for this just to show it as an example. So what we're looking at right now, since I've graded my footage, is it's a little bit more vibrant, but it's pretty close to what I would be getting out of the camera, except for there's a little bit more contrast in here. It looks a little bit better than I get straight out of the camera without doing raw footage. But let's just pretend this is what I got right out of the camera. Sometimes you want to add a little bit of a look and feel to the footage without making major changes to the color itself. And so that's when you're going to be able to use something. We're going to click on this effects panel, the bottom right hand corner. I'm going to click on color. I'm going to click on custom LUT. We're going to want to use something called a LUT. And there are a ton of LUTs out there. I will leave links to the ones that I use. But a LUT is simply a look. It's predefined and it has a specific look for your footage. So the one that I almost always use is one called Kodak Killer, and all these are made by Peter McKinnon. He's a filmmaker, and I use Kodak Killer pretty regularly because it's a look and feel that is actually applied in many Hollywood movies, which is that orange and teal look. Now when I just drag it on there, this actually looks pretty ugly, right? And because what we usually want to do is we want to lower that mix to be just a little under, maybe around 25%, but you're going to want to play around with this based upon how intense you want this to look. But it's just going to add a little bit of a flair to your footage that makes it a little bit more professional. And again, this is kind of something that you have to consider from your standpoint in terms of what you want the style to look like. So, and kind of how nitpicky you want to be with the colors as well. But this is a great way to kind of add in an extra little look and feel if you want to. Now that's Kodak Killer, but there's a ton in here, so I won't go through all of these. I just wanted to give you the idea of kind of what that can do. And yeah, they're very simple to work with. As I mentioned, I will link to the specific LUTs that I use from Peter McKinnon, but there's a ton out there, and I think there's even a lot of free ones as well that can kind of help you change the look and feel of your footage. Now, another option as well, if you don't want to work with custom LUTs, we're just going to, in this effects panel, we're just going to click that checkbox to remove that particular effect from this adjustment layer. They actually do have a lot of custom colors within color or color presets that you can use as well. So if you're looking for something very simple, if you think that maybe, you know what, my footage is just too dark, you can just drag Brighten onto there and then just kind of mess with the particular, we didn't want to change that. You can just go through and start messing with some of the settings for how you want that to look. So it's totally up to you in terms of how you add or incorporate those items. But just know that Final Cut Pro does have some built in, but I've just noticed that some of the LUTs that a lot of creators out there have made tend to be a little bit higher quality and just have a better look and feel to them. Okay, so once we've applied all of the colors that we like and we've got those adjustment layers where we want them, the next step is to take them and to drag them across all of the footage that we want to apply that to. So as you can see, because I'm using raw colors or raw color scheme or a raw format for both the photos and the videos, I want to make sure that I drag that across everything so it applies to all of that footage. So we'll go ahead and drag this across. There we go. And we just want to drag this again across everything. Perfect, and you just want to make sure that it's all the way on top. There we go, and as you can see, it's now applied to everything. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is audio. So this is a subject that could have its own series. There's so much that goes into it. Now, because I use a specific type of microphone and I'm trying to get a very specific type of sound out of it, I've actually gone in and I've applied a number of specific tweaks to kind of make it fit my microphone. So I'm not really going to share those with you unless you just so happen to be using the exact same setup that I am, which you're probably not. But you do want to keep an eye on those audio levels. As you can see, that my audio levels, they're all very close to that line, right? You see that they're kind of all the little peaks go really close to that line, and not too much is going outside of it. You know, if I pull this up, you'll notice a lot of yellow and red in there. And that means that I'm peaking. If you see any red, that means that your audio is peaking, which means that it's going to be very difficult. It's going to make a very distorted and odd sound. It's going to be very unpleasant to the ears. So if you see your audio peaking like that, you're going to make sure you bring the overall audio down. And again, there's a ton of things that you can apply in terms of effects to help deal with that. I'm not going to get into it in this video because that is a huge can of worms. However, there are two tools that I want to share with you. So if you click on this effects panel and you go down to audio, you'll notice that you have a ton of effects available to you specifically for audio. And there's two that I want to share with you. The first, all you want to do is make sure that probably the easiest way to do this is click on all audio and video and just type the word, oops, wrong keyboard, noise. And you're going to find something called a denoiser. Now, a lot of people will use the noise gate, but the problem is that a noise gate, particularly if you're getting this hum or this hiss or this background ambient noise that you want to get rid of, a noise gate does not fix that unless you're not talking. A denoiser, on the other hand, can fix a hum in the background if you are just talking. So what you want to do is drag that thing right onto your clip, and you want to start making edits to it. Now, right out of the box, usually what I've noticed about the denoiser is that it tends to muffle some of your voice. You want to make sure that you go through here and you change some of these settings based upon the specific type of noise that you're getting. The other that is a very cool tool that I wish I knew about way sooner, it's since been fixed by upgrading my microphone, but there's something also called the de-esser. So just type in esser and that's going to find it for you. But what this is going to do is it's going to analyze your footage. And again, you're going to need to go through and you may have to tweak with some of the settings. But what this is going to do is, if you have ever been listening to audio before, maybe it's been in some of your own videos that you've worked in, you notice this kind of high-pitched S sound. Whenever you make your S's, maybe it distorts or it hisses or something, or it doesn't come across as it should. A de-esser will actually go through and find all of those S's and lower the volume on them so they sound more natural. So two really cool tools that can make pretty normal sounding or pretty average sounding audio sound a little bit better. Okay, so once we have applied the effects we want to our audio, as you can see here by the waveforms, you notice that this has been edited and looks the way I want it to, or sounds the way I want it to, I should say. But you'll notice that I've got a whole bunch of clips here to which that doesn't apply. So all we want to do is click on the clip that we've edited for the proper sound, Control C on the keyboard. You can also go to Edit and Copy. Then you want to select all of the clips we want to apply those effects to. Go to Edit, and then go to paste attributes. You should also press Control Shift, or I should say Command Shift V. I've been saying Control, I mean Command. So there we go, and then we'll hit that shortcut. There we go. And then what you'll see is this will show up, and it will have a ton of things that you're copying that you may want to paste over. And in this case, it's just the audio attributes. I just want to affect the volume, the EQ, and the loudness. Those are the effects that I've applied. And then I'm going to click paste. And as you can see, all those waveforms will automatically change and they all match. And there you go. That's exactly what we want. And that's how you can apply any of your audio or even video effects from one clip to multiple. The next thing we're going to take a look at is something called titling. So sometimes you might want like a lower thirds, or maybe on top of your B-roll, you might want some words to show up on screen. So Final Cut Pro does have some of those available to you. So you just want to click up here at this little T icon, and then we want to click on Build In and Out. And as you can see, there's a ton of titles here. I'm going to recommend that you don't go too overboard on these. You want to keep them very basic. So for most things, I'm going to recommend that you just use custom. Or if you want a really basic and subtle animation, maybe you could use blur or fade. We'll just go ahead and use fade in this case, just to keep it really simple. I'm going to drag that down under a timeline. And as you can see, some boring old text shows up, right? So let's go ahead and edit that text. So we just select that adjustment layer, click the paragraph tab. There we go. You have all your formatting and editing options right here. So we'll click to have this left aligned. Maybe we'll make this bold. Obviously all the fonts that are available on your computer will show up here. So we'll use this one for now. That works. You can adjust the size a little bit. Then what we want to do is click on it and drag it to the corner. That is if we're going to be doing lower thirds in this case. There we go. Then we'll go ahead and duplicate this particular layer. Change the text. There we go. Select and move this down. Perfect. Then we'll make this size a little bit smaller. Drag that up. Actually, better yet, let's go ahead and just drag this one down. There we go. So that works pretty well. Maybe we want that to be a little bit longer. And maybe we want my name to last a little bit longer than the video producer. So let's go ahead and just move that around a little bit. There we go. Now, one thing that you might notice occasionally is that sometimes maybe this isn't very readable. So we want some kind of dark color behind that to help that. So here's a little trick for something that you can do to make that a little bit more readable. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to solids. So under generators, solid, we'll click custom, and we'll drag this black screen directly underneath our title. Now, obviously, it's just going to show a black screen underneath our title, exactly as you would imagine. What we're going to do is we're going to add, first of all, a cross dissolve at the beginning and the end. Create transition. Oh, actually, first what we want to do, this is just kind of a little hack. If you ever notice this next to another item, it's going to try to dissolve between those, but we don't want that. We want it just at the beginning and end of this. Perfect. Then we can delete this. Move this over. Perfect. Exactly what we want there. Okay, so that's not what we want, obviously, but we've got this black section here that fades in and out. So now let's just select it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to click over here to effects, and we're going to look for masks. So under masks, we're going to find graduated mask, drag that onto the black bar. And we've got these two knobs here. So we're going to select, move these around. We're going to take the bottom one, move it the opposite direction. We're going to drag it all the way to the bottom. Just like that. Then what we're going to do, in fact, you can move this even a little bit further down if you want to make it a little bit more subtle. Then we're going to add another one because you can add multiple effects to the same clip. And you can do this to video clips as well. Obviously, we're just making a little mask and our little faded background in this case. I'm going to reverse that real quick. There we go. And then we've got this nice little subtly blended black fade that shows up in the corner. So let's watch this now. Now, there's a ton you can do here. You could add, instead of a black bar, you could add a video animation. You could add an image there. You don't have to do what I did, but that's a great way to be able to do your nice lower thirds. Now, in a future video, we will be talking about a ton of different animations and plugins that you can use to make more fancy text, but that should give you the basics. Okay, so the last element that we want to add to this particular video that we're working on is some music. So the way that you would do that is we would go back to that main event where we have not added in any music yet. We've added the audio to our main clips, but to our main event. And then we want to pick our music. So there we go. We've got this nice mixed down track. And all you're going to do is drag that first, or you can drag it directly on your timeline, but I'm going to add that first to this event. And then I'm going to add it to this particular project. We'll just go ahead and shorten this a little bit just so it goes right to where we're starting here. And as you're going to be able to hear out of the box, this is going to dominate. It's going to dominate my talking. Okay, so that is way too loud. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this little bar. We're going to drop it down a little here. There we go. And that's a nice subtle track in the background. And it just goes right below. So different than all the effects and extra clips that we're putting on top, instead, we're going to put this audio below. And you can mix as many different sound effects or audio files as you want below the actual video footage, I should say. One other option that you have available to you as well, if you prefer to work with your audio similar to the way I'm working with this music here, you can actually right click on a clip and then click detach audio. So let's say that maybe you want to run and transition into a different video clip, but keep that audio running in the background. Detaching it is a great way to do that. Okay, so as a quick recap, we've gone through, we've added in all of our individual clips, we've cut between camera angles, we've synced our audio, we've edited our audio, we've added in a little montage both between video as well as some nice Ken Burns panning effects into our images. We've added color grading, we've added some transitions, added in some transitions, added in some titlings, and even some music. Okay, so hopefully that has given you the groundwork to begin the process of editing with Final Cut Pro. I was trying to make this video as short as possible to kind of cram in the essentials. Now, I know there are a million and one other things that I could have covered in this video, but again, my goal here wasn't to teach you everything about Final Cut Pro. It was to show you some of the basics so that when you jump in, you're more familiar and you can get off and running quickly. Now, one of the ways that I've found learning typically works best, at least it did in my case, was just to jump in there and to experiment. And so that's what I'm going to recommend that you do. Jump in, create your first project in Final Cut Pro. And one of the things I'm going to do for you is I'm going to give you free access to all of the montage video clips that I have created. So those individual videos that you saw, those slow-mo clips of my office that kind of pan to different areas, I'm going to give you free access to all of those just to help you out so you can experiment with them, you can slow them down, you can piece together your own video montage to get more familiar with Final Cut Pro. So those are going to be available to subscribers over at thomasmcgee.tv. There will be a link in the description where you can access those. And again, being a subscriber over at thomasmcgee.tv is absolutely free. So click the link in the description to get those for free. In addition to that, also in the description, I've left links to any and all of the resources that I used as I was going through this particular tutorial for Final Cut Pro. Okay, so now we've gotten very familiar both with the interface as well as editing in the timeline of Final Cut Pro. In the next video, we're going to go through the process of exporting as well as publishing and distributing your video so that once you've created your creation, you can get it out into the world. So as always, if you found this video and this series useful, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.